Please welcome back to the show, for I believe now his third return, the psychedelic philosopher, the alchemist of tears, the messenger of love. Please welcome back to the show, Adam Butler. How's it going today, man?
Fantastic. How are you, my friend? Even though we've already been talking for 25 minutes, act like we haven't been. Nice to see you. Yeah.
That's how it always goes, man.
Yeah.
But half the problem is you have to start up the conversation because you start getting into some really good spots of conversation. You're like, damn, I haven't actually hit record yet. And that happens to us almost every single time because if I didn't start hitting record, we probably would have went for an hour and a half and then wish we would have recorded all that too. So
Well, so it's a perfect segue to start the conversation. And as we discussed, we know it's going to flow for hours and hours and still not cover half of the shit. But just saying, like, starting it like that, being authentic, being true to yourself, not ever lying, even something as simple as not being phony as like, oh, how are you? Nice to talk to you. Like, because that conveys, like, I couldn't just, I kind of had to bust balls and break it up. Like, yeah, we just talked for 25 minutes because I don't want to come off as phony, even as something as simple as an introduction to a podcast, because it's like, I don't know. It makes my body cringe if I'm not presenting myself in an honest and authentic way. And I think that's the big picture of what we were just talking about, about what people need to ultimately do, which is find themselves, which is learn about themselves, self-knowledge, self-love. And then, yeah, that expands to so much other crap. But
I'm really, really glad that you said that because I've actually had this thing sitting on my mind lately that it seems like podcasts in general are starting to expand into this thing that's like never what they're intended to be. Like podcasts were strictly supposed to be this like audio based thing, but now it's just basically turning into just radio on the internet with the ad placements all the same, with the voices all the same in the beginning, introducing the guests and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, I've been having this thing sitting in my mind lately about kind of going back to this like outlaw, like original podcaster style about like how I started off with and not trying to like keep up quote with the other podcasts and do anything that they're doing because that's never really been my style anyways. But I'm really glad you said that because it was just this weird thing that's been sitting in my mind and it's kind of been like on that turner about like, am I going to try to make this new direction where I just basically say fuck trying to, do what all the new podcasts are doing and just stick to what I believe podcast should be. And that weirdly inspired me that I think I'm gonna go back to that and get rid of that fucking start up with the hey, welcome to the show, well everybody, like blah 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 blah. Like that's again not authentic. That's not how I talk. That's not how I am. Like
well, so a perfect kind of flow into the next statement then about how, since I first went on your show, so that was what, like 3 years ago, and so much amazing things have happened since then. And that book that I wrote has opened up so many doors, and not so much to talk about psychedelics and things like that, more just to talk to human kind of interactions. And through all that, I think what my story is really resonating is not that I'm the DMT expert. That's Rick Strassman and Andrew Gallimore and, like Danny Gola, the guy that's doing the laser thing. Like he's been smoking DMT for 15 years and has done it thousands of times. And that's not
is that
like
the guy that's doing the thing where they look on like the side of the wall
right.
and they can see like the matrix split?
Yes. So I've done the laser experiment multiple times. I'm friends with Danny, and I wrote a couple videos about that. So I can definitely get into that with you as well.
I was gonna say I don't want to sidetrack you, but I at least want to hear like a quick like reference to your thoughts on that experiment since you brought it up.
Awesome. So it's mind blowing. It's everything that he's saying it is, and with full humility, it's everything that it's not that he's saying it's not. Like people sometimes hop on him like, oh, you're saying you found the code of reality. It's a term to try to describe something. He's not saying he found, like the secrets to the universe type shit. It's just there's something clearly there that is not like any other DMT kind of thing. But we'll definitely get to that. But so again, I'm not necessarily the best of the best of the DMT, and I am certainly not, a PhD with a therapist degree or a lab coat, and the authority in that sense. How I think my story is really resonating is that I'm true, raw, authentic. I don't give a shit how I say it. If I offend anybody, my job is to know that I just have to be the best me, stay true to myself. And that is so refreshing to people and I think that's really why things have really been taken off for me. Is not that I have, like even the recipes in my book about how to make DMT and how to make ayahuasca. Yeah, that's interesting. That's cool. Like that's really important information. But that's been on the internet, and that's not my recipes. I just copied them and pasted them. That's been there. It's the novelty is the authenticity. So I would say lean into that, because not only that makes you enjoy the podcast and enjoy and vibrate in your body in a much better way, but people will pick up on that because, and this is all honesty, and actually this applies to me too, dude, there's plenty of fucking middle-aged white men talking about psychedelics, Bigfoot, cryptids, expanded consciousness, lucid dreaming, and these are all the topics that I love and I'm passionate about. But how I can stand out is really just be like, yeah, but I'm the 45-year-old guy from New England that was the drunk asshole that lost everything, that did all, like I've got some crazy stories that I can lean into. And knowing you and having now whatever 7 hours of conversation with you, there's a lot of cool things that you can talk about, including being a dad, including being some of these other things that aren't just whatever, like the same old repeating of UFO stories. Like, and because I'm interested in you and your life. And even just, again, before recording, we talk about how can we collaborate? How can we do meet and greets? How can we actually do shit in person? Where it's like, that's the stuff where we'll get more out of life. And then I think more out of podcasts and book sales. So just a rant to start on there. Yeah. Be
No, I
more you,
definitely
Shane.
agree
That's
with
what
you.
I want to see.
No, I definitely agree with you, man, because at least from like your perspective, and I think what a lot of people gravitate towards you with is the fact that you kind of hit stuff with a lot more of, like you were mentioning, like a raw sense, where a lot of people that are into this like psychedelic type research, they almost kind of do this whole like enlightenment path type of concept where they seem like they kind of have the answers. They seem like they want to give the answers, but you have to follow this specific path. And it kind of almost kind of feels, I don't want to say like culty, but for a lot of people, it almost kind of
Preachy.
feels culty. Yeah. And for a lot of people that have gotten into psychedelics, it's a matter of the people that kind of question things in reality. So when you have somebody that's in that psychedelic realm, but they're trying to give you the answers, like for a lot of people that are in that mindset, like that's like an instant red flag. So if you have somebody that's giving you the information more raw and not telling you to follow a specific path, it just, I think, resonates a lot better with people because, like you were kind of mentioning, you weren't necessarily the best person ever. You've had your skeletons in your closet, and honestly, the same for me. And that's how a lot of people that have gone through the psychedelic journey have been through it. Is you start off on this terrible path of alcoholism, whatever it happens to be. As I was mentioning on a previous show, I believe, alcoholism was what did it for me to the point where I put myself in the hospital, almost lost my family. And if it wasn't for me having this, I guess you could say like a revival through like
Mm-hmm.
psychedelics, then I would have never been able to get my head straight and really start to figure out what I want to do in life. And the hardest part about it that I feel like a lot of people don't fully understand is that when you start getting into the whole psychedelic research, it kind of expands past the idea of psychedelics, meaning that, me, myself, yes, I am in that field of expressing these things and talking about these things, but, it's not like I'm a regular psychedelic user because it's kind of a matter of once you've done it before, it kind of unlocks these different ideas and areas of thought. And if you haven't been through that before, you may not necessarily think of stuff from that perspective, but it's not like you regularly have to do it. It's just a way of almost like seeing outside of the box for a little bit to give you a new perspective on life. But once you've seen outside of the box, it's a lot harder to just kind of sham yourself back into that box again. So even beyond the psychedelic experience, just having it once, you start seeing stuff from this outside perspective, and it's really, really hard to go back.
Yeah, that was beautifully said. And to add on to that, I would say, and I think I typically mention this on most of the podcasts is, psychedelics are not for everybody. DMT is definitely not for everybody. And, that's probably one of the messages that I think is important to share is I know psychedelics aren't going to be the path that are going to help everybody, and nor should they be. But that's really the big point is there are so many other modalities to remove that plaque, to find that inner light, whatever people need to do to kind of shake out of the day-to-day crap that typically is bogging people down. That's really the important message. And there's so many different ways of doing it. And it could just be as simple as going to yoga or taking a walk out in the woods or going back to the gym or taking karate or um, and this is where I've now dedicated my life to these really cool different modalities. So yes, I love psychedelics. I love exploring psychedelics. I do it always with respect and reverence. I do it always with the intent of trying to learn more and explore more. And I'm not saying this is negative, like if people do this, but I've never done it in a party setting. I've never done it at a concert or a rave. I've never done it in a massive group setting. I only use psychedelics for self exploration, and because of that. I've gotten so much benefit. That being said, I went to Monroe Institute to combine psychedelic experiences with their technology, which is just simply listening to binaural beats through headphones and then, meditating and really kind of getting control of your body. And it was amazing and it was beautiful and truly psychedelic. And you kind of learn all of the lessons that I learned in the psychedelics by going to Monroe. And then I mentioned how I just got back from this 5-day darkness retreat. So pitch blackness, 100 plus hours. The guy that was sitting for me came and brought food in the morning and then food at night. But other than that, it was, you know, another modality, completely different from the other ones, where the other ones you're adding, and you're trying to get, hyper elevated, where this was just subtract everything. But again, it all came back to highly psychedelic, highly visual, highly like intuitive learning. And I've got to be careful about how many times I say life-saving or transformational or one of the most profound experiences, because I don't want to null it or like dumb them down. But it's like, fuck, like that darkness retreat will save somebody's life and be transformative. A week at the Monroe will do the same thing. A few hardcore sessions with shrooms or DMT, like you will, and to your point, you will not be the same person and just bogged down with the news, the social media smut, keeping up with the Joneses, and most importantly, and again, where my area of passion is being so depressed and anxious and just fed up with the world and not comfortable in your own skin, where you become really to the point where you're suicidal and depressed and want to take your own life. And that's where there's just really wide range of, I was going to say teenagers, but not even adolescent kids, all the way to 70-year-olds that are battling mental health illness, where it's not, well, go do shrooms or go sit with DMT and that's the answer. It's more, no, sit with your thoughts, look in the mirror, have the conversation with yourself, know that you're worthy of time for that self exploration, and whatever that may be. And this is the key point, and I'll pass it back to you, is that I think another reason why my message is really kind of like taken off with, not that my message, like, again, I'm mirroring the same thing that people have been saying for thousands of years, is that it's not do this one thing, read this book, go to this place, do this retreat, and you'll be fixed, or go to this 5 days something, and that's not it at all. It's everybody's going to have their own way, their own problems, their own kind of inner cracks in the psyche that they need addressing. But only that person knows that, and only that person knows kind of like what feels good and what doesn't. And when people start exploring themselves, it's a rabbit hole that just feels so good to keep going down. And like you, like me, like a lot of our inner circle and our friends, like you see that sparkle in their eye where they're like, oh yeah, I've pierced the veil, I've seen through it, and you're not going back to just being whatever, another cog in the wheel again. And it's so liberating and freeing.
It's once you start really like understanding the subconscious mind, because I think that's kind of like the well around to a lot of this stuff, is whether you get into this from psychedelics or you get into this from occult philosophy, anything like that. It all goes back to this idea of the subconscious mind and trying to understand the workings of the subconscious mind, which this is kind of where it gets into another point that I was going to try to bring up, where you were mentioning that not all these treats, not all these different things are for everybody. What a lot of people have a hard time understanding, and I see this regularly in life, whether it's at work, whether it's with family, whether it's with anybody, a lot of people will do a process, but not understand the philosophy behind the process. So as soon as there's something that doesn't necessarily work, they get completely thrown out and they don't know what to do or how to understand like how to function with that specific thing. So, people will do this process, but not understand that there's a broader picture to the concept. Like they'll believe that, going and doing this DMT trip is what's going to instantly fix them. And it's not the philosophy and the understanding of life that they're going to get from the experience itself to bring back into everything. It's almost like the same concept with, somebody at work. If you teach them the exact process on how to do something, as soon as something breaks away from that process, then they don't know what to do anymore because they really don't understand the full process. And I think a lot of people are taking the time to try to do these things to, quote, heal themselves, but they're not taking the time to actually understand the whys, the full philosophy behind it. They're kind of just riding along with the process and then wondering why the process isn't working. And this is something that I regularly see with a lot of people going to like therapy, for example. I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with therapy necessarily, but a lot of people want to go and they think that just talking to the person is going to make everything in their life better. But what they need to understand is the philosophy and the psychology behind what the person is actually saying to them, so that they can actually do these things in the real world, where, if somebody's just simply sitting and giving advice and they're not actually hearing the advice and actually trying to put it into practical use, it's not really doing anything. And this is where a lot of people fall into these hard spots with therapists, for example, where they don't think that it's actually doing anything. It's because they're not taking the time to actually understand the reasoning for the process.
And I have some really maybe practical insight on therapists, because I'm just thinking about my past week. So again, rawness and authenticity, and just kind of being truthful. Let me write this down though before I lose my train of thought. So I mentioned how not only all these like amazing events happening, and the weight of going through that darkness retreat. But then like right before that, I just got out of a long-term 4-year relationship with like my best friend, my girlfriend, my partner. Like, so that was really traumatic. Um,
That was the woman from the first book, right? That wrote the
yeah,
one chapter in the first book.
Alicia, my beautiful Alicia. Yeah, and a friendly parting, and I wish her the best. But I mean, just mentally, really, really tough to get over. I mentioned how my parents are getting divorced. Like, we're moving out of the house. Like, I used to bust my balls about how I live in my parents' basement. Like, I don't even have my parents' basement anymore because we got to move. Like, there's all this crazy shit going on. So, and I've really like been able to process it and integrate it. And I say all that, but throughout the process, there's been about 3 or 4 people, and even you now, because this is all new and raw. So like, you're acting as a therapist for me now. But my normal reproach, and I even said it kind of in my book about how it's so easy to lie to your friends or family or deceive your spouse. It's so easy to lie to your therapist, and how I used to pay this guy $240 an hour. He was an older gentleman, Brown University educated, like primo guy, and he was a great therapist, and I really think he had my best interest. But I was going, and so, but this was when I was still drinking. I was still, again, so this is the pre-Adam, right, or the before the psychedelics. So I was still the drunk, narcissistic, belligerent asshole who was manipulative, but I was still highly smart, intelligent, and I could use my words, and I was able to go into this office, and I wasn't lying to him, but I was trying to manipulate the conversation, and I was trying to paint a picture where it was this woe is me. Society doesn't get it. I'm too smart. I'm too whatever. This guy, like, I just, I'm not fitting in because I'm so unique and special. And it's like, the truth is, and then I would paint why I'm so great and unique and I did all these things, when the truth is like, no, because you're a fucking idiot drunk asshole and you treat people like shit, and you go around thinking people don't think you're a drunk asshole when everybody else knows it, and you're the only idiot thinking because you have a piece of gum in your mouth that no one knows you're drunk. And it's like, so I looked at this realization of how I was going in there. So was I getting anything from that therapist? Fuck no, nothing. Because I was going there thinking I'm just pulling one over on him. And then that way I could go home and be more of a narcissistic, manipulative person and tell my girlfriend, hey, even the therapist agreed with me that I'm right and you're wrong. Like, that's the type of mental mind fuck that I was going and trying to do this one up on the therapist. Right. So that's that's my normal kind of take on what I used to do. Now, that being said, over the past 2 years, I've let some, and not that age has anything to do with it, but I feel like, several people in my life that are in their 50s, 60s, and maybe even a bit older, that they know all of my intimate stories. They know all of my warts and all of my scars. They know all of my healing journey. They know where I'm at. They know where I'm at currently. And because I'm so open and raw and wear my heart on my sleeve, they really know the true, authentic me. So now when all of this shit went down, like I had this, and I had this amazing conversation today with this lady, Shelly, who recently came into my life, and her husband are really just instrumental in not only helping me with my career and moving forward, but really just addressing some of my own inner work. And I called her today, and I just went on this like half-hour rant, and I told her, all about all of the shit, bullet pointed from my relationship to my mom, and I said I haven't slept in 5 days, and all this shit, and my eyes are, and I'm crying my eyes out. And then I say to her at the end, I said, thank you for being a pressure relief valve for me. I said, there aren't too many people that I can trust that could handle the weight of what I just said to you and do it in a capacity where that's not judgmental, and do it to allow me so that way I can just literally just vent and just be like, whew. So I did that for a half hour, and just, it felt so great to purge. And then I said, because you know me so well, and I know you don't have any ulterior motives, and you're an educated therapist, and you do this for a living, so you've dealt with a bunch of broken middle-aged men who would, all the same issues I went through. So then she was able to like sincerely absorb my story, gave me really great advice based on her friendship with me, but also her 20 years of experience of dealing with all these other guys. Ended with some really great, not necessarily made me feel good, really just made some practical advice. Then I planned a trip. In a month from now, I'm going out to meet her and her husband again. I'm going to bring my mom with me. We're doing this awesome ceremony. And it just turned into this, like, I got out of it and I was great. So now, is she a therapist or a friend? Are you a therapist or a friend? And I think it can be both. But if you're going there thinking with again, here's the thing about being authentic, true, and honest. If you're talking to somebody trying to get better insight on yourself, honestly and authentically, and I was with this woman, please help me. And literally, I was begging her, please help me with my insight. Then that therapist this morning was amazing and was worth thousands of dollars an hour. Luckily, she's my friend and gave it to me for free. That other guy, I could have been paying him $1,000 an hour and I would have got shit out of it, because I would have walking out of there being like, I'm going to go get a beer. And I just made that, I just told him, like, yeah, like, what did I just tell him? And that's where everything comes down to being authentic and true to yourself. And if I could, I think the easy ways for people to do that is, one, just hold yourself accountable. And if you can't do that by your own, always think you're on camera or being recorded. For me, I always think that, as well as God's on one shoulder, my Pepe's on one shoulder. And now that I go into these psychedelic spaces, that these DMT entities are there to, you can't lie, and you have to telepathically, tell the truth. And then the other real easy one is just physiologically and physically. It feels great when you're resonating and vibrating with doing the right thing and helping out, and really when you're aligned to what you're going to do. So whether it be being a dad or reporting on things or educating, and then it's really gut checking, like makes you want to vomit when you're not doing what you're doing. You know what I mean? Like if you're like, oh shit, I hope no one's watching me, or fuck, I hope I can get away with that, or like you feel like shit. And it's simple. Don't do the things that make you feel like shit, and do the things that make you feel great. And then you line that up for a few days, a few weeks, a few months, a few years. And then you just, all of a sudden you just don't tolerate anything that comes into your field that makes you not vibrate at that higher level.
Oh yeah, dude, I want to throw in that I think that this is one of the reasons why it's so important that people actually understand and try to research themselves, like occult philosophy in general, and psychology, is because, one, you can use it for yourself, because you're never going to be more true to anybody than yourself. So if you have the ability to actually sit by yourself in the dark and you can actually tear apart your own mind, that's like one of the best ways that you'll really get to the roots of like any of your problems. But on top of that, of course, having these one-on-ones with friends, what not a better way to actually get to the root of helping out your friend if you actually can understand some of these concepts of psychology and philosophy? Because, a therapist is never going to understand you as authentically as your friend's going to. They're always going to have that perimeter up. And on the other side of it, you got to remember too that, there is good therapists out there, but on the other side, there's definitely ones that know that it's not going to work, and they're just going to sit there and collect the money because they know that, that's their job at the end of the day, unfortunately. But getting back into another really good point that you had brought up, the way that you said that you were able to basically just expel everything and be able to get advice on it after you're able to say everything that you've said. I think that's one of the hardest parts for a lot of guys, is that a lot of guys have all this buildup and they don't know necessarily what to do with it. And a lot of people don't understand that the best way for guys to deal with that built up emotion is to have these like expel periods. And most guys, I think, feel almost guilty for having these, but it feels like it's the most authentic way for guys to be able to relieve their stress, is that we are prone to anger. That's just something that we naturally do. Testosterone is linked to anger and aggression. So what not a better way to express our feelings than to be able to release that aggression? But with the society we live in nowadays, we try to look at toxic masculinity like, oh, being too much of an aggressive male is necessarily a bad thing. But I don't think it's a bad thing. But guys are so, compressed with all this stuff that it's like they need to be able to express it sometimes. And when guys have an issue and they just need to have that angry outburst for a minute, I think that that's something that people need to take the time to actually understand is a natural thing that guys need to do. And on the flip side of it, like you were kind of mentioning, guys kind of have this mindset where they need to expel to feel better with stress. And then afterwards, they can hit you with the, I either want your opinion or I don't want your opinion, because depending on the guys, sometimes you just need to expel, and then other times you want that opinion. But with a lot of guys, you want that more empirical opinion, like you were kind of mentioning a bit earlier, where it's that unbiased opinion. So I think this is like one of the hardest thing for guys, is that nobody ever wants to talk about it, but there's this natural way that guys tend to relieve their emotions and stress, but it's untalked about. And it seems like most guys end up feeling guilty for this like natural way that we want to express our feelings.
Well, until you do it. Until you do it and it feels great, like
Exactly.
what we're doing right now. Like this feels so natural and so common. I'm anybody that knows me, like I'm not trying to fluff your nuts. I'm not trying to like, hey Shane, please be my friend. Like I know when I was getting on, coming on with you, that I knew it was going to be comfortable. It was going to be casual. I know I didn't have to kind of like, I know I could trust you with my inner stories. And I don't think I'm being a pussy by doing that. I don't think I'm like being any less of a man by trusting in you. If anything, it's enriching my life doing that. And again, because it feels good, because this is part of, again, and I said, it's part of my therapy. And for those that, I meant same thing, like I may not be like the DMT expert or the best at whatever, the best therapist, and how I can really now say, like, I've been a therapist for a lot of people, is not that you need to have some education in a specific field, or I've read all the literature, or know some bullet points about IFS systems, or you need to know really the difference between Freud and Jung, and how that applies to what. No, you just really need to know how to treat people like a human, be there, hold space for them, give them the space to tell their story, and then know how to hold the mirror at the right angle where that's just reflecting back at them. Because that, if that person is going to manipulate you or tell you bullshit, it's not going to help them. So really, it's just a matter of making that person feel comfortable, where yes, they're kind of telling you, but really they're just telling themselves. And sometimes they're telling themselves like that for the first time. And I've found that, I talked to a guy the other day, and he had, and this could apply to anybody, right? He had like these three major, he called them knots, and they were just kind of these roadblocks in his life that he couldn't get over. Talked to him for 45 minutes. We unlocked the knots. He was ecstatic. He was so happy. He was like, I can't believe just the conversation with you. And like, I've been fighting these things for years. And it's not because I'm some super smart guy that had the answers. It was just, I asked like 3 or 4 questions. I let him contemplate it, and then kind of made a couple kind of suggestions. And then he was just like, he had that aha moment himself. So, if somebody thinks, well, I can't hold space for somebody, or I'm not a therapist, you are, if you can just hold the mirror to deflect it. And then, to your point about the aspect of masculinity.
Also, too, just to throw it in, too, having the right perspective. I want to throw that in because, somebody who's had a squeaky clean life isn't going to give great advice to somebody who's been a recovering addict, but somebody who's been an addict before is going to give great advice to that person because they've been in that story before. So people need to remember that you may not feel like you're the most qualified person for the position, but if you've been through that same struggles as that person before and you came out on top,
then you're
probably the most qualified person to talk to that person, even without having doctorates or anything like that, just because you can actually talk to them from a point of understanding where, if somebody, again, who's completely squeaky clean is talking to an addict, like, how can you tell them, like, just to get over it or what to do specifically if they've never actually had that struggle before? I mean, it's one thing on paper, but it's a totally different thing to actually live it.
And a perfect real life example of that is, I've got a couple like book tour events coming up where they're like speaking events. And I've asked my mother, I'm like, you should come with me and get on stage. Everybody that knows my story knows how important my mother was with that mending of it. And to say, so she's never done psychedelics. She is definitely not a DMT or a shroom expert. But what she is an expert is being side by side every day for a son that went through this horrible suicidal kind of ideation thing. A woman who initially started with, hey, psychedelics kind of bad in drugs, to now realize, oh, well, now that they're plant-based medicines that can really help. And she is the perfect expert for the mother who has a depressed kid, or for the mother who lost somebody through suicide, or, like, she is the perfect, to your point, she's that perfect expert where, who knows, like in my case, I'm 5 years sober from being an alcoholic. Like, so I'm a really good person to talk to for middle-aged guys that are going through this. Now, I've never done heroin. I've never done hard drugs. I've never done opiates. So I've got a lot of close friends that do, that are now clean. And, they would be the experts to speak on opioid addiction, not me. And it's like, so it's really just, lean into where you're, where you, again, your true authentic story. Yeah, and then the same thing about that masculine thing. It just feels so good when you can blend it. And to your point about being on the other side, like, I mean, I don't you see my gnarly knuckle fucking hands, but like, so I've punched and broken my hands multiple times. I've done the tough guy alpha male, Hulk run through shit. I've redlined my car and threatened to kill people on the road, and all of those things that typically are expressed as this like alpha, like whatever. And to your point, we need that release, but there's 2 releases. Yes, you need the physical release. So again, go to the gym, hit a punching bag, go to the driving range and hit some golf balls. Have crazy sex. Have crazy sex for 2 hours and let that release out.
I mean, that's even true even for like death, for example, because just to throw this one in there, man, I've gone through some loss, and like my first reaction is to like punch walls even with death. Yeah. Like it's weird. It's something that naturally goes beyond with guys, that you have to have some type of like a physical exertion of force to like feel your emotions properly, no matter what they are. It's so weird, man.
So I found scream, and this may sound, but to scream as loud as you can, especially like in the car, to just do like a primal scream, like so don't punch your car and hit your dash. And I've done that before, where now you punch the car when you're driving, and so now your radio's cracked, your dashboard's like, that sucks. Don't do that. But to just primal scream and just as hard as you can, that really does help. But that's still not enough. And the second part of that is you do need that emotional release. You do need that, like I said, that therapist for me just to express it. And I've got several guy friends who I can't wait whenever I have an issue. And this is going to sound, again, corny to say it or even whatever, feminine to say it. I can't wait to run into their arms, to hug them, for them to embrace me when I'm in the dark, dark spot, because I know they're a sponge to absorb my physical pain. I know they're there to really be there to give me advice. And this is where being comfortable in your own skin. And there's nothing wrong with whatever your sexual orientation is. I'm not homosexual. I'm not gay. I can appreciate like another male, whatever, but I have no desire to sexually interact with another guy. That, again, whatever your preference is, that's cool. So therefore, it's not awkward for me to hug another guy at all. I have no problem going up to my big burly bearded 200-pound guy and saying, "Give me a hug." Why the fuck would I? I would take a trip across the country with him. I would share an apartment with him. I would whatever. Like I'd wipe his ass. If he got in an accident, I'd wipe his ass. Like what? I'm not gonna hug this man when I know he's an important part of my life. And that's where it's like, why? Says who? If somebody sees us hugging and they think they're gonna talk shit about me and any one of these guys, like good on you, man. You're gonna get your ass kicked. Like, so it's almost like, all right, so now do you want to see me be the male? Like, all right, hold on, let me finish hugging my guy friend and crying, and then I'm gonna kick your ass. Like, so do you want to see I have both? You know what I mean? It's like that's where it's just no. And here's even the better part. If one of those guys are gay or slightly gay and is getting a fucking little chub by doing it, be honest with one another and be like, you know what, Shane, I'm coming in for a hug, and can we rub beards because whatever. I just want to leave you with a couple fucking gray hairs. Then at least express that and be cool. And that's where that type of honesty, maybe not with the guy to guy thing, but I work with a lot of women in one of my other side jobs, and we exchange amazing hugs. And again, there's nothing sexual there at all, because it's just because now if it is sexual, it would say, I would, hey, whatever, you want to hook up after work, but that's not it. It's let's embrace because you just lost your mom, like, or that type of shit, and
No, I'm
be
glad
true
that
to
you brought that
yourself.
up, man, because that's something that I feel like breaks down a lot of really good guy friendships, because I've experienced this multiple times in my life. I mean, you see me on the show, you see what type of person I am. And of course, my close guy friends, you want to, express the fact that you're close guy friends. And I've had a lot of like really close guy friends like break off being friends because they did me wrong on something. I'll call them out on it and be like, "Hey man, like this is bothering me." And they're like, "What, are you gay?" Like that whole
Yeah.
thing like ends up breaking apart so many guy friends because
Ah,
people have that
right.
wall up of like, oh, this is what a male should do, this is what a male shouldn't do. But again,
God
like you were
forbid you
kind of
express
mentioning, if he's your
yourself.
best friend that you would, take a bullet for this guy, why would you not, hug your best friend goodbye? Like it doesn't have to
Right.
be weird. Like again, I feel like that wall, that whole idea of like what masculinity should be has broken down way too many really good guy friendships because people have that weird wall up because society tells them they should.
hmm And not only and I'm calling out one of my friends right now, Sean. So he's the one that I wrote in the book about. He's the one that really he's been there for all of my shit. When we leave, it's not just like, yeah, we're going for a hug and hey, give me a quick pat, hey, see you later, and dab him up. I hold him. I embrace. I put my heart to his heart, and it's not like, let's make it awkward and hold each other for 30 seconds. But let's have a good 3 to 5 count, a solid. You know what I mean? It's not just like, oh yeah, because well, we're cool with hugging, so we're just gonna hug. It's like, let's do it meaningfully, and let's really embrace. And again, we're both the better for it. And so that's where it's really important. And you said about putting up a wall, and I was just thinking about a concept. And Carl Jung had this. I don't know if it was reading from one of his speeches but I've heard like the same kind of rundown on multiple videos. So he must have said it in one of his lectures or something like that. But he was talking about, and this applies to everybody, the importance of setting up boundaries in one's life. And whether that be personal boundaries, work boundaries, spatial sex boundaries, boundaries if you're doing psychedelics, like whatever it may be. Like even you just asked me before we started recording, do you have any time limits? So simple, what's your boundary? Can we go to 10? Can we go to 11? And I told you what my boundaries were. Well, I have up until this time, and this is what I'd like to do. But most people think about they're forming their boundaries, or they're thinking about what they, well, I don't want my husband to come home past this, or I've got to tell, whatever it may be. There seems to be this negative connotation, and that speech by Carl Jung was just beautiful because he goes over about how it protects yourself, and you're giving people the truly the boundaries and walls that they need to stay apart in. But then the other end of that conversation was, but also within those boundaries that you're installing gates of clarity. And then he went into really expound upon what a gate of clarity is, and then it tells people what's acceptable to me, what this is what I want, whatever. I'm a vegetarian, I don't want the meat touching my plate. Oh well, that's stupid. Or it's just a little bit of meat sauce in the red sauce. No, I'm telling you, I'm a vegetarian, I don't want, like, to express what the boundaries are. And then with the gates of clarity, it's so liberating and freeing, where like every one of my, so I'm in this super fucking weird transition and transitional state where, like, I'm single now, but even when I wasn't, when I was still with Alicia, we were kind of in open, well, we were an open poly relationship. So I was always still kind of dating. So like anytime I would approach a new woman or try to court somebody, it would be right off the fucking jump. Listen, I used to be a millionaire. I used to own all these houses. I'm still driving the fancy car, and I'm whatever. If you want to see my resume, it's fucking stacked. But right now, I'm making $25 an hour. I'm broke. I'm living in my parents' basement. If we go there, you got to be quiet. And I'm not the guy that can take you out on a week's vacation, but we can go out to dinner and play it, that rawness and that authenticity, in saying I don't want to get married, I don't want to have kids, and I got to get a girlfriend at home. So like all of these things. So I would screen 99% of women before ever meeting up with me. And it's almost like, fuck, if they said they were going to meet me for coffee, I was like, dude, this is a weird fucking chick. Like, it's because I've already screened out all of the normal women. And it's like, all right, cool. So then when we finally met, it was just like, all right, so I know you're not a gold digger because I don't have money. I know you're not asking, like, you don't need a place to live because I don't have a fucking place to live. I know you don't want kids or trying to marry me up because that's not. And so like, that's a practical way. And because of that, I've had really good luck with dating and kind of like that aspect of the life. But now as I'm figuring out too what my next career path is, this same thing, just literally throwing my cards on the table, where I tell them straight up, excuse me, the last job I lost, I threatened to kill the co-owner because he screwed me over $900. Like, actually, I just went and told him I bought a new car, and I was kind of telling that to the car salesman, not in a bragging way, but he's sitting there for 5, 7, 8 hours to get in this thing, and I was telling him about like how my life changed, and at the end, like they owed me like $2,000, and they're like, come back in 2 days and get it, and I'm like, you good? I'm like, you're gonna shake on this? And then I went and manage it, and I'm like, he's gonna shake on that, and I went and got like the other manager, and I said, listen, I'm not trying to say he's lying or he's lying. I said, I just want to let you know that, like, if I come here in 2 days and that check isn't here, and it's not because, if you tell me it's going to be here in a week, tell me it's going to be here in 2 weeks, and I'd be fine with it. But don't fucking lie to me and tell 3 grown men look at me and be like, that asshole just left. Because if all 3 of you think I'm an asshole, I'm going to come and, like, all 3 of you are going to be addressed in a couple days from now. But it was said with a quiet voice, a calm demeanor. There was no threat. I had my presence calm and cool. And I told them, and then the boundary and the gates of clarity was, listen, I said, I don't do well, like, and not that I necessarily said like, hey, like I'm broken and I'm going through some shit, but pretty much I was like, I have a very short fuse, and I'm just being honest with you. Like, I don't have the ability to take people being dishonest, and like really the only thing that means anything to my life is truth and honesty. So then it went from like, well, what are you trying to be, a tough guy asshole, to just, hey, listen, I'm telling you, I'm kind of broken, fragile right now, and all I want is the truth and honest discussion with everybody, including you, because I'm giving you 20 grand for this truck. And then everything changed. And then when I went the other day and got to go back to get the 2 grand, it was like, oh, my old buddy Adam's back, and it's because I had the balls to just say, here's my boundaries, here's my gates of clarity. I don't think I'm being an asshole. I'm just telling you what my gates of clarity are. And it just makes everything in every interaction that much easier. And I'm telling you, like, when people start doing that, it just trickles out into everything you do, because like, oh yeah, I can do this. Like, I can stand up for myself. I can determine where I go. And maybe I'm ranting, but let's just see what should happen. Like, a perfect example of this, my uncle just died 4 days ago, 5 days ago. I mentioned how we're having some family problems right now with my mom and my dad, and there's a lot of conversations that need to happen. Now, rightly so, my mom was like, let's just get through the funeral. Let's, like, for your aunt, let's be calm. Like, let's just go and give respect for the deceased. Absolutely, right? Well, after the church, now it's, well, we're going to go to a restaurant and everybody's going to chill. Well, I'm seeing all my aunts and cousins I haven't seen in a while. Like, a lot of people there's like 30 people that I want to go see. Now, I've just been crying for fucking 4 days. Like, my whole life is fucking going to shit. The guy that's caused it is right there. And I'm like, you want me to go sit and eat meatballs and fucking sauce? And everybody's gonna ask me how I'm doing. And it's like, well, how I'm doing, my home, like, you really want to know? And I just sent a text to my aunt saying, I made peace with Uncle Joe. I can't go to this. Like, I'm not going to sit there and be fake. And that may be like, well, you're an asshole. You didn't go to no. When I was at the church, I prayed to him. I talked to him. I made my peace. I said my goodbyes. But I'm not going to sit there for an hour and a half and act phony to 15 people that I love and respect when they ask me how I'm doing. When all I want to say is, well, I've been crying for 5 days in a row because my whole life is in the shit. Like, and that's, again, so it can work to your benefit, it can work to your whatever. It's just, I'll never be in a situation where I'm sitting there being like, I shouldn't be here. It won't happen.
I definitely agree with you there, man. I've been dealing with some stuff in my own personal life that seems relatively close to this, with the whole idea of like setting boundaries and everything. That I've had a pretty tumultuous relationship with my dad my entire life, and as of recently, he he's been bipolar for a very long time, and he had this like huge manic up thing that was happening. And usually when he's manic up, he treats everybody like complete fucking trash. Like, tells everybody that they're wrong, tells everybody everything that's wrong with their life, everything that they've ever done wrong. And then on the other side of it, he's sad, he's depressed, and everything sucks, and life should just end, kind of a thing. So going through these cycles, man, of him always telling me every couple months that I'm a piece of shit, everything that I'm doing is wrong, how I'm raising my kids is wrong, all this type of shit. I just like cut him off after the last one, man, because I'm fucking tired of hearing the excuses that everybody uses constantly, that like, mental illness, I can treat you however the fuck you want and you're supposed to forgive me within like a couple weeks after, man. I had to finally like set this boundary up. And this is such a hard thing with a lot of people, which is why I wanted to bring it up, that everybody feels like you have to be tied to your mother and father all the time. And in most cases, if the relationship is good, of course, work everything out. But if you've had a tumultuous relationship with your entire life, at a certain point, it's okay to admit that that person isn't doing any good for you in your life, and they're causing you more stress and more depression and more anxiety than anything. And it's okay to set up that boundary to just cut the people out after a certain point. Like, when you're done dealing with the shit, just because they're family doesn't mean you should continue dealing with their shit.
Yeah. Yeah. So if and this is where, fuck, like, as much as that, and then when we first started talking, it's like, yeah, let's talk about the real heavy shit. Where like, and let's after this, let's talk about like some fun laser shit and get off some of the heavier stuff.
Oh, yeah, we'll get into the fourth dimension beings, because that was something I definitely want to bring up.
But this is where, again, owning your shit, being authentic in your skin, and all of that. So I'm same major issues with my dad, has to do with alcohol. He's actually fucking in like a psych ward right now as of like 2 days ago, and all this crazy shit's happening. He's finally getting help, and my uncle said something to the effect of, so his brother, that, my dad, so my grandfather on his side was also a hard negative alcoholic, and said something to the effect of, my dad is everything nasty that his dad was, but then even worse. Like, he's even more of a monster, and he was even worse. And I'm looking and I'm green, like, yeah, because I knew both. My Pepe was kind of a dick, but my dad's even more of a dick. But the truth is that I was so much more of a dick than my father ever was. I was him times 10, times 100. And as much as that nastiness and the venom and the monstrous that I'm saying my father expressed, if I'm being honest with myself, I was way worse, way more, everything multiplied. And he directed it, and again, not right or wrong, towards one woman, my mother, unfortunately. I directed it towards multiple women, multiple women's kids, multiple, like, so for me to hear all of that, and then to be like, oh, fuck, like that was me so much worse. But then that's why it took all this pain and energy to end this generational kind of thing. And it's like, that's why I took my foot down. Now I'm 5 years sober. Like, my body's battered and bruised, but I was able to do all this. And I say all that because then here's the, like you're saying, you cut him off. And at this point, I'm not talking to my dad right now either.
But the hardest part for me, just to throw it in there, was the disappointment of constantly going through these ups and downs as a kid of, oh, I want to hang out with you, everything's so great, and then not having an interest in you whatsoever.
He's treating himself like that.
Yeah.
So
I'm seeing the same cycle happen to my kids, and it's like he's trying to use them as like this middle ground be like, oh, when am I going to be able to see the kids? And I'm like, dude, I don't want to put them through the same disappointments that I went through. And he just doesn't see that perspective. It's setting that boundary, man.
And so not only with him, but with your kids. And then say, I don't know how old they are, but that, like, maybe at what point they can maybe make their own decisions. But to say, you've done nothing wrong. I'm just letting you know this is why I'm making this decision, why I don't want this person around you. And, like, to let them really know. Yeah. But to the and this may be this applies to everybody, not just like me and you and our dads, but whether it be whatever. So saying that, and I mentioned it because that I was that monster and I did all these horrible things. And man, if I could watch back videos of me at my worst, I don't even know, like it would be so fucking crushing. And I say that because I'm such a 180-degree difference from what I used to be in all the negative aspects of my life, literally in every category. And that I'm not saying I'm some enlightened, fixed soul. Not I'm still a flawed fuck human, and I still got a lot of pile of shit I'm working out of. But I will never raise my voice and scream to a woman. I will never threaten and do the shit like the myriad of things that I said I was a monster of. I would never even conceive of doing ever. And it's again because it's so against with how my body works and everything right now. And I became sober at 40. Could my father get 5 years of sobriety and now at 76 become a whole different man? I have to say yes, because the people that I fucked over and people in my family that I did wrong, they gave me that second chance. So for maybe the person that's bipolar, or for maybe for the person that's name it, like I think not we. That's for everybody. Again, that's your own boundary to make. For me personally, I have a lot of leniency for people to change, and now I have enough boundary where I won't let that person in to fuck me over. Like, and even with all this shit, I told them, like, I will always, like, I'll give you money, food, and shelter if you ever need it, because you've always offered that to me. But you're not getting my love, my story. You're not going to be part of my life. So as long as you like, clearly express how your boundaries are, I think you can protect yourself. But I think it's important for people to be able to forgive, or to know that that's a process on your own terms, because that's part of your own internal forgiving. And, as much as I can say, fuck you, I don't want to talk to my dad, I know he holds a very important key to my psychological wounds. I know if him and I would just hold each other and he would tell me he loves me and we would just have that moment, that would be better for both of us. So I want to make sure I'm not too stubborn to say, like, yeah, fuck you, because you know what? People did that to me. Maybe I wouldn't have had the space to be the man I am today. And it sucks it's happening in the 70s. I wish it would happen for most people earlier on, but I just say that whether it be your dad or other people, I don't know, like, protect yourself, but people can change, and I'm living proof of that, because I was a fucking horrible man. Like, honestly, you would not want to talk to me and be my friend.
No, I definitely agree. People can change. I mean, I'm the same as you, man. I've had my terrible past, and I've changed completely 360, and I'd be embarrassed of the person that I used to be. So I definitely agree that people can change. But the hardest part about, like, the aspect that I was bringing up is that a lot of the time people want to try to, like, force that forgiveness, and they don't understand that sometimes that it, like, takes time, and it takes time away from each other.
Mm,
And a lot of the time people think that if a relationship is starting to fall apart, that you need to pull everything that you possibly can to pull it together. But sometimes the best thing for a relationship is actually having that space apart to be
yeah,
able to fully, like, understand yourself and come to clarity to actually be able to come back together again. And if you're constantly doing this thing where you're trying to, like, hold it together as it's falling apart, then it never gets the chance to
yeah,
actually remend
to
individually
breathe.
to come back
Right.
together stronger.
Yeah, well said. No, I agree.
But I guess shifting it up, because I
Yeah,
know that we
fourth
said that we're
dimension
gonna,
laser. Let's do something fun for the last
yeah,
whatever.
let's
What
start
do you want to
switching
talk
it back
about?
in, man, because I wanted to get into fourth dimensional beings, man, because this is
Mm-hmm.
something that I've been on the rabbit trail of a lot lately, diving into a lot of the cult philosophy with things, and just trying to have an understanding of our perspective in general. And it seems like no matter what I dive into, whether it's the Bible, whether it's fucking any type of religion, honestly, it kind of comes back to this, like, fourth dimensional perspective. And one of the things that kind of, like, kicked that into my head, for example, was this whole idea about the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. And when you start kind of breaking that down, possibly in a different perspective, you kind of get into this possibly, like, fourth dimensional perspective on
Mm-hmm.
things, where you have the Father, which would be this thing that's existing in the ethereal, which would be like this fourth dimension. You have the Son, which would be the thing that's existing in our third dimension reality. And then you have the Holy Spirit, which would be this thing that's existing everywhere all at once. And it's a hard concept to try to describe, of course, because we're not fourth dimensional beings. So the best way that we can try to describe that is from a third dimensional perspective. But yeah, it seems like no matter what you end up diving into, it kind of gets into this concept that we're interacting with these beings that seem to be in a higher plane of existence than we are. And we're constantly trying to describe basically this fourth dimension or these higher dimensions in the best way that we can. And with that, of course, the perception changes constantly. And that's where you have all this division with all these different viewpoints, perspective, wars amongst different religions and everything. Like, at the end of the day, man, I think that we're all talking about the same thing. And what we're talking about in the clearest definition with today's society would be fourth dimensional or higher dimensional beings. So that whole thing with a lot of your psychedelic research that you've been doing and with a lot of these different institutes that you've been going to, I kind of wanted to get your idea and perspective and possible like interactions with these type of things, and what you think the perspective could be even from like their perspective.
So I think an easy kind of common sense, like practical way of explaining that is that, you know, us as a human, typically you would say we have our five senses and there's a certain level of sensitivity to it. I think through all of the modalities that we've talked about, all of these explorations that not only I, but, so many of other people have done, is that clearly we are way more than those five senses. We can dial those up, but we also have many others. Like even, the catchphrase of Monroe is where you're more than your physical body. Anybody that does psychedelic trips, you're way more than your physical body. And it's just because you're able to respond with energetic information way greater than. So like Aldous Huxley's book, Doors of Perception, that's a really kind of like foundational book in the psychedelic space. And he just really matter of factly goes through a concept that a lot of now most philosophers kind of agree upon, is that there's it's not even philosophy, so there's way more energetic vibrational energy than we're taking in. We're only, bringing in a small amount of that electromagnetic wavelength. So in addition to radio waves and TV waves and other electromagnetic waves, there's so much more just kind of going around us. So in order for us to survive, we really just have to reduce most of it out and just take in a small amount. But there's so much shit around us constantly being bombarded with. And it's just the sensitivity of our antenna that determines, what we're picking up. So whether it's somebody going into deep meditation and increasing their sensitivity, or adding layers of complexity, or adding whatever, a satellite radio to the CD radio to the AM to the FM, or if it's maybe somebody like the telepathy tapes, where these autistic nonverbal children, they're just chromosomal makeup makes their antenna different, so they're able to truly communicate telepathically. Or again, there's so many different modalities and so many different combinations of how humans can resonate and vibe, that I think people are interacting with, now if you want to call them beings, and this is where I kind of get into it with like my sister, where it's like, you talk about interacting with aliens or ghosts, and you talk about how you converse with gods, and that and she's like, well, I've never seen a ghost or an alien, or what do they look like? And it's like, well, I'm not saying I've necessarily interacted with like little grays, or that like God sits and smokes a pipe with me, but I'm clearly like I'm having these profound interactions, learning and like absorbing information from something, like, and it's different than just reading a book or listening to a CD, and that is part of the human nature. And I think that's part of just quieting your mind, being either super still and quieting it, like I just did at that darkness retreat, or going the opposite end and vibrating the shit out of it with MEO, 5-MeO, DMT and DMT, and doing all that shit. But either way, humans are just experiencing what they're saying non-human things, but it's just because that's just natural state non-human. But humans can be way more expansive, as we well know. And I think it's just, we're just picking up on all the shit that's out there. And I think that encompasses Bigfoot and aliens and all this stuff, where it's like, that's not crazy to say that. It's just, if you can tune into the Bigfoot channel, I think you can see the Bigfoot. Like, that's, I don't know, I can tune into the DMT channel. That's how I can interact with them.
So your perception of reality, like you were kind of mentioning, is like whatever you tune into, because it seems like people that are looking for Sasquatch experiences tend to have Sasquatch experiences. People that are looking for the paranormal tend to have paranormal experiences. It's almost kind of like the double slit experiment, where reality interacts when it's observed. And this kind of gets into something that I wanted to mention that I was talking about before the show. This thing that I've been doing lately after diving into hermeticism, that I call color experiments. And it kind of proves that like perception is malleable. So basically the concept and what I try to do is I'll take an object, like something that I'm working with, for example, or something that, is near me that nobody else is really focusing on, because I'll get into like the harder part when other people are focusing on something. But if you particularly focus on something, and I call it color experiments because you try to swap the colors of things. So you don't typically try to do it and I haven't, maybe this is more an advanced point that you can get to this point, but I'll try to do it with colors that are relatively close. Like one of the things I've been doing at work is we have these green sponges that we always scrub things with. So when I'm in the middle of working, I'll close my eyes and I'll start focusing. And in my mind, I'll start saying that this sponge is blue. This sponge is blue. This sponge is blue. And I'll start seeing it as blue in my head. And in no doubt in my mind, I see this sponge is blue. And then when I open my eyes for a good like 30 seconds to a minute before I start focusing back in with everything else around me and all the different distractions, I start seeing that sponge is blue. Another example, when I'm in the shower, my son has this little duck mirror that's yellow. When I'm in the shower, I'll start focusing on it and start saying that this thing is orange. This mirror is orange. This mirror is orange. And then when I open my eyes, the mirror will end up being orange. Reality can be altered depending on your perception of reality. And this is where the harder part goes in with other people's perception of reality. Because when I try to do these color experiments with things that are in the middle of the room, for example, that a lot of other people are focusing on, it doesn't end up working. It seems to only be objects that only one person is focusing on. So this gets into the broader term that I want to get into about the whole idea of perception with people. Whatever we are deciding as a group to perceive as reality is what people end up perceiving, because I think it's somewhat of like a group effort, meaning that, prime example with a lot of the Sasquatch experiences, you know, it's usually a single guy out in the woods, or it's 3 different people that are looking for Sasquatch, and then they end up coming across Sasquatch because you now have 3 people that are focusing on this thing in reality to happen. So I think that this concept can go into a lot of a broader concept, even with reality, with this whole like chaos theory concept that, you know, everybody has always presented this idea that the reality is this chaotic, evil place. And if everybody is group thinking and always has their subconscious mind on the fact that reality is this chaotic place, then it's going to appear as this chaotic place. But if you can break your perception away and you have a group of people maybe that can break this perception away from it being this reality, then all of a sudden this reality starts to shift. So this just shows as a broader concept that reality is malleable, and what we perceive as reality may not necessarily be reality, because if enough people focus in on something, you can start to shift reality.
Yeah, and I don't think what you're saying is like, you know, 3 guys can think about a Bigfoot and they're manifesting a Bigfoot. Like, and that's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying, you know, it's, and as much as I'm about, you know, like manifesting your reality and trying to, you know, like put out the good
It's more
energy,
of like a subconscious programming. It's not like a literal right in front of you thing. It's like you have to believe something in your subconscious, and then once you truly believe it, that's when things start to actually present. But that's where the hard part comes in, because if you have doubt in your mind with anything, then that's when your reality is going to show what your subconscious is actually saying.
Yeah, and you need to have, you know, maybe like we were talking about that analogy with the antenna about adding different like actual wavelengths that you're taking in, but maybe even like using languages. So, you know, if you don't speak Bigfoot, or like, you know, say if somebody were to speak or write Japanese, if you don't know that, that's just going to sound like somebody just saying a bunch of like sounds together. Where if you know what they're saying, you can be like, oh, he just said, you know, that bus is going to the mountain over there. So same thing, like if you don't know how to tune in to how to pick up a DMT entity or a Bigfoot, you're just, even if they're standing right in the room, you don't have the capacity to see him or dial in. So I feel like that with, and the same kind of concept about like going into the DMT space and then vibrating at that specific frequency where that's what you're interacting with. Like that's because you're going to the jazz show to listen to the jazz band. So yeah, incidentally, when they stop playing, you're listening to jazz. Like, you know, you get to dial in, whatever what you're trying, and that doesn't mean, well, like my mind is creating the jazz music. No, it's just like steps went to be able to pick that up.
Like your perception was slightly shifted, and this is where I get into the whole thing with like 4th dimensional beings, is that the whole idea with like the 4th dimension is probably the best way to break it down. Are you familiar with the book Flatlands, for example, by chance?
No.
Oh, it's a fascinating read. I've been telling a lot of people to read this one. It's written in like 1838 by Edwin A. Abbott. But basically what this book is he's basically trying to, it's from the perspective of a 2-dimensional being, and they start having interactions from a 3rd-dimensional being. So it's
before.
Trying to describe the perspective of a 3rd-dimensional being from like a 2nd-dimensional being. Maybe it was last time we were chatting, but it gets into this whole idea about basically the next dimension can see the inside of the previous dimension. And it starts
Mm-hmm.
breaking it down from the 2D perspective, meaning that the third dimension is existing in this spot that's outside of the second dimension, meaning that they can see everything from the side. So they can see, quote, the inside of everything that's in the third dimension. And this is where you start getting into this whole idea of string theory that, reality is more so like blended and twisted into itself and not necessarily a layer sitting on top of a layer, because this is the hard
Well,
time that I have describing is that if you're looking at it as the next dimension up can see inside of the dimension lower, you get into these like older occult concepts that like the all is mind, the all is mental. The inside of the physical reality would be this mental reality. So then you get into this next step up that it states basically that is the fourth dimension able to perceive inside of us, and what is their perception of seeing inside of us? Is it being able to see inside of our psyche because we're now looking at this from a higher dimension step up? And if that is the case, then essentially these things are always here. They're always around. It's just a matter of they're at this twist or perception shift around the
mm-hmm.
corner that you're not actually able to see, even though they're always there. So when you get into these psychedelic mind states, or you take psychedelics, for example, then it alters your perception, where it's not that you're creating these things in your mind, but rather that, like you were saying, the antenna or the perception is being slightly tweaked. So now you're able to see inside of this other perspective. And another reason that I always say that, and I'm sure that you've probably had some of these experiences, when I've been on enough LSD, I can do these weird things where like I'll cover my eyes and I'll have a friend stand behind me and he'll put up different fingers. And I can always tell what the fingers are, because you get this other perception where it's like you can feel and see everything around you, even though you can't actually see it. So
Mm-hmm.
if you're experiencing that while on a psychedelic experience, is that basically slightly stepping into what like the fourth dimensional being's perspective would be, where they're able to see basically this inside and outside of things without actually physically seeing it? I know, long-winded attempt to explain this, but just like a
Well,
mind-blowing concept.
and that's it's all going to be long-winded bullshit. Anybody trying to describe this, but like you even just saying it without even bringing in psychedelics, like I'm thinking about how I try to describe, some of like my psychedelic sessions, where it's like, you become both the observed and the observer, or you're looking from like a pinpoint, but also from the like circumference of the circle, and you like there's you try to or like everything spinning mandalas and turning in on itself, and so there's always this concept of this like in and out, within and without, and above and below, like all at the same
Like the
time. And
tesseract too, even getting into some
it,
more like astral science concepts, the idea of the
yeah,
tesseract of
or
this square
like all
constantly
the
rotating
torus
inside and outside of itself.
kind of donut, kind of always just kind of like going and flowing in itself, and then so every deep DMT session, that's the weird kind of physics of it. So I think, and that's what you're trying to describe, like how does something in 3D describe 2D, and or how does the high dimension perceive the low dimension? And I guess I think that's what I'm seeing when I go into these DMT spaces. Like it makes sense, like through the words that I think we've learned about physics, that seems to be what you're describing, because it's not like, well, yeah, it goes from, like, it's very kind of easy to go from 2D to 3D. Like, yeah, I can understand that. You're drawing on paper. Well, now it's like where it sounds like getting into that fourth dimension is what I'm experiencing and what other people are experiencing, where it's like, yeah, like where are you? Like, what is your point of reference? Well, it's not over here and it's not in here. It's everywhere all at once. And it's not, it's both the minute and the massive all at the same time. And it's like, well, how can that be? Like, what do you mean you're in the center and at the outside of this? I don't know. Like, well, I think it's maybe because you're looking at it from that higher dimension, and it's just, you're able to encompass everything all at the same time. And maybe that's, again, where that concept of like all is one, and everything's based on love and connection, and that time is malleable because it can go back and forth, because from that high dimension, it's all just, I don't know, it's all just lesser than, and can be not necessarily manipulated, but it's just yeah, it's of a lower dimension, right? So I mean, you're kind of just using repetitive words, but
It
yeah,
seems like
it's,
it's more
well,
it becomes more malleable as you go up. Like it seems like as you go down, the realities seem a lot more physical and they seem a lot more stationary. But then as you go up to these like higher vibrations, as they say, reality appears to be more malleable because the energy forms are constantly in motion. So if you're going into lower states where there's less vibration, everything is going to be more and more stationary. But as you're getting into higher
well,
vibrations, like you were mentioning, you get into these shapes that don't make any sense because you're getting into a place where everything is vibrating at such a high frequency that everything is constantly in such a state of motion that it gets past our reality where we know everything's in motion, but it looks stationary. When you get into these higher places where everything is so elevated, everything is visibly in motion because it is so highly elevated. Like, it's such a weird thing to think about, but if you're looking at it just stationarily from, like, for example, like wavelengths from like cold to heat, for example, the colder it gets, the more slow and stationary it gets. The higher it gets, the more vibrant and more crazy it gets. So assumably the same idea would be portrayed in higher dimensions, just like
Yeah.
the whole idea in the occult of the micro mirrors the macro. I mean, if it displays its self in this way, why wouldn't it be the same in the higher sense? Which means that as we get into like the 11th reality, for example, stuff might be so energetic and vibrant that it looks like absolutely no fucking sense, where that's when you might start getting into these experiences of people talking about these like energetic light beings where things are so highly in motion that they just look like a burst of light. And maybe this could even be where people get into like interacting with God, for example, that they interact with these beings that are so vibrant and so big that basically like they get blinded just from seeing these things because the energy is so vast that these things are putting off. Like, is it possible that again some of these like God himself type beings are like these higher dimensional beings where it's like, even like fourth dimensional, fifth dimensional beings can't perceive these things properly because they're at such a high energetic rate that they just come off essentially as a burst of energy to anybody or anything that experiences or sees these things.
Yeah. I, yeah, and what's coming to me, like I'm thinking about how if people haven't experienced this, where they must be like, well, that's just they're still in 3D and they're just trying to talk about it in 4D. And like I'm thinking about like, because I just was doing some like graphic designing. So if you have whatever the image of an arrow on a page and it's just a blank lettering, well then you can do um, like an outline to it to make it look raised, and then you can put a glow on it so it looks like it's buzzing a little bit, but it's still, it's still 2D. But there are things to make it go from looking flat to looking elevated to now maybe you can make the paper raised and now it's like actually, imprinted a little bit, and you can go from 2D to 3D to now like you're holding the block of letters, and you can see that transition. And same thing with like the transition of the strength of a trip or like a DMT session where it's way different from, you're looking at a pool, you're seeing the surface of the water, and you're seeing the surface do all like weird shit. Like you can still in a trip be like, all right, I'm looking at the surface, I'm seeing 3D movement on the surface. But what happens when you start going closer to the pool, and then that's the surface starts mending into you, and then now you're in like the water is you in your soul, and now like how do you describe you became one with not only the pool but the water, and then each individual hydrogen molecule mixed with your, it's like, and how, once again, how colorful do you want to get to how immersed you get. But it's a very clear distinction from sitting on the lawn chair tripping balls looking at the surface to 2 hours later when you're like, no, I am the surface. And that, I think, is that shift from whatever dimensional space, because it's way different. And it's not just visual. It's easy to kind of talk about the visual aspect of it, but all of those senses have the 2D to the 3D translation, and then the 3D to the 4D. So we talk about again the hyper senses of vision, but that goes with touch, that goes with sound. I mean, that's why I love going through the explorations of these spaces, whether it be psychedelics or not. Like that 5-day darkness retreat, that was so psychedelic and mind blowing and awesome and vibratory hum, like rapid eye movement but you're not sleeping. But are you ever really sleeping or dreaming? You don't know because everything's the same, and it's like you just sit there and you fucking like buzzing out. Like that's where you start blending those boundaries of what is 2D, 3D, 4D, and then what is the boundary of, all right, is this my physical body, really being hypersensitive and being hyper like physical, or is it now vibrating at a higher level? Well, now that's starting to separate. Now this is my energetic, vibrational, emotional body, and then then it goes to this, and it's like, yeah, there are those separations. And I guess that's kind of one of those, like, if you haven't experienced it, and I wouldn't expect anybody to just take my story for unless they've experienced it themselves. But like once you converse with God, once you touch God once, or once you whatever analogy you want to do, like I don't know, once you touch water and know it's wet and swim in it, like you don't have to be, you'll know what that is. And it's like once you see that, oh fuck, this is what a divine human when the veil is removed and I'm humming at my full like potential feels like, you can't forget that. And vice versa, when you're bogged down with alcohol and hungover and prescription pilled out and covering everything and running from shit, you know that that is not what a human should be either.
I mean, that's when you get bogged down into like the third dimension reality and you think that this is like where all physical sensation and touch and everything like that is. But when you actually start breaking into even just having psychedelic experiences and feeling like the like overexertion of the way that you feel like emotions, the way that you feel physical touch, all of this type of stuff, you start getting into these interactions with these fourth dimensional beings and the experiences that people bring back of these like ultimate feelings of love or passion or all of these different things. And it almost kind of makes you wonder like how emotions, just how all of these basic things would possibly be felt in a higher dimension, because assumably if everything in this reality gets amplified into the next step up, then as you continuously go up, these feelings are going to get higher and higher as far as like how passionately and how in depth that you're actually going to feel them. And if you start breaking down that concept, that's where it starts getting weird into this whole idea about like, reincarnation, or the whole idea of like the soul trap, or, trying to build up to like higher levels of vibration or frequency. It's like some people may not be able to understand or be able to comprehend that, because you see enough people now that have enough problems dealing with their emotions in this physical reality. Like imagine if you just unlock those people into the next fourth dimension reality, like they're going to completely go batshit crazy because
Well,
they're not going to know how to like express or feel these things properly. So it almost kind of makes sense that it almost kind of seems like reality could possibly be these training wheels where in order to get to the next
mm,
reality or the next frequency up, you really do have to play the game in these lower ones, because it's almost like, taking the sensitivity off completely. Nobody's going to know how to interact with that. You kind of have to shield away a little bit more sensitivity as you go up.
yeah,
Otherwise, it's like being thrown into the middle of the ocean and you're just like, what the fuck do I do in this situation? Like, you have to be able to break
yeah.
down each
Well,
barrier and understand it as you get higher up into these different areas. And, you know, I'm starting to become a firm believer in the idea that we build up to these higher dimensions, meaning that, the whole idea of death isn't necessarily death. It's just a shedding of this third dimension reality body to become this energetic form. Because once you start
a
really
firm believer of
understanding
that.
the possibility of how the fourth dimension reacts and how it interacts, like it's beyond physical. So if you ever are going to go to that place, you would have to shed your physical
Hmm.
body. So the whole idea of death,
Hmm.
like, starts to kind of get thrown out the window when you start connecting in even science with the possibility of these higher dimensions and these higher realities. Because,
Yeah.
dude, even just weird stuff that they trickle into a lot of different sci-fi, man. Like I've been throwing this one into Star Trek forever, that they talk about these different societies and these different civilizations of beings that have progressed past being physical beings, and they become these like energy forms. And when they become energy forms, they have the ability to like manipulate physical things in reality, because they understand how these energy forms can
Hmm.
be manipulated and moved. So it's like this whole idea has been portrayed in sci-fi. It's been portrayed in books for years. It's kind of
And
like one of those
and it
underlying
makes
tones
sense,
that it
right? I
makes
mean,
sense.
it's
Yes.
you're not going to expand and get back into being a dinosaur or have more physical body or require more caloric intake or be bigger. Like it's going to keep going, compacting, and yeah, it's
The whole idea of hell, I've been wanting to throw this one into the show forever, and I just didn't know where I could throw it into a good spot in the conversation. But I've been kind of wondering myself if the whole idea of hell is people that didn't actually get the grasp of a fourth dimensional understanding. So basically, their fourth dimension reality is essentially them having the
stuck in
mindset of a
3D.
third dimension, but
Yes.
being stuck in a fourth dimensional reality. So
Oh,
essentially, they
yeah.
seem like they're in infinite torment because
Right.
they're inside
That
of
is
objects.
hell.
Everything's flowing and moving. Everything is just, yeah, they
It'd be
couldn't
like you
break that
being stuck as a
mindset.
stick figure on a page, knowing that you used to be in 3D.
Exactly. Yeah. This was like a mind blowing thing I was sitting there
Yeah.
with one night.
No,
Is
yeah.
hell literally just people that weren't able to break into that fourth dimensional mindset, so they're stuck
Well,
in the fourth dimension with a third dimensional mindset? Like, it's
yeah, and
crazy to think about, but horrifying.
that's the importance of that perspective shift, because and that's where kind of heaven on earth and heaven within. I firmly believe that. Like when I talk about that concept of heaven or hell, or even any, and it's not necessarily religious, but kind of like spiritual, where I don't think that it's some place that hell is below some fiery pit, or that you're ascending to some physical place up in heaven. I think it is a perception, and it is that heaven within, because again, I've been wallowing in that personal hell where I wanted to hurt myself, kill myself, take out society, and man, it is fucking horrible. It is truly hell. It's being stuck in a nightmare you can't get out, and everything's awful. Two, being on the other side where you're vibrating and humming and you're content and joyful, and your life is full of synchronicities, and even if the line is long in the market, you end up having conversations with cool people, and it's just, and you do have this heaven within. And even with all the fucking shit that I just I'm going through, like it's like, well, we're gonna do this, and we've already planning trips, and I'm thinking about how my life can expand, and I just did this book, and it's like, it's just you, it's how you process the world, and it is that perspective shift. And again, some practical things where maybe you think what an unnecessary fear or limitation, and it's limiting you from doing something, and then it's just a perspective shift, like, oh, I don't have to run from him or her, or you know what, like I am qualified for this job, or yeah, I am deserving of a loving relationship. Like just having the to stand up, to have like that conviction of thought, is a great kind of whatever. I lost my train of thought on that one, but yeah.
Well, I wanted to throw this one in too, since we're also talking about like fourth dimensional being perspective too. I don't know if I shared this one with you. I may have shared it like maybe the first time that we had talked, but I've never actually like fully blasted off on DMT, but I've had a couple of different experiences where I'm kind of like breaking the doorway down a little bit. And one of these experiences was I had done a little bit and I was like staring at my pillow, and as I'm staring at my pillow I start seeing this like image of what almost looks like a, you know what it, like the Japanese uni are, they kind of look like they're like those colorful demon looking guys.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I started seeing one of those faces like morph into this pillow.
Mm-hmm.
And as I'm seeing that, all my cats are also looking at this pillow, which I thought was really, really weird, because every time I've had psychedelic experiences and I start looking at something or doing something, like my cats interact with it. It's super duper weird. But as I'm experiencing this, I'm also having this like wholeness feeling where it's like I feel like it's hard to explain, but like I feel like I'm inside of this being as I'm also seeing an image of it while I'm inside of it. And it's like such a hard concept to describe. And this is like, I've never really been able to break this down with anybody to really describe this part of it. But like, it kind of gets into like what we were saying about this whole idea that it's really, really hard to perceive. And this gets into this whole thing I was mentioning with like the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit about trying to break these concepts down into third dimension perspective reality. But you know, like as I'm experiencing this psychedelic experience, I mean, it doesn't seem too far off from the idea that this thing was existing somewhere else. It was existing everywhere, but it was also existing in front of me all at once. And it seems like every time you get into this breakdown of fourth dimensional beings reacting or interacting with us, it's hard to describe, but essentially people break it down in those three different components: that they feel like it's somewhere else, they feel like it's everywhere, but they also see it physically in front of them. And I'm assuming with some of your psychedelic experiences, you've kind of probably experienced something relatively similar to this, right?
Yes, and I'm getting goosebumps because I feel like that's so hard to describe. But we were just talking about collaborating, and I mentioned about future guests. So I just befriended about a month ago this guy, David Comstock. He with talking to him and I, we motivated each other to do a bunch of stuff. He just wrote this book that he's publishing called Serpent Rise, and he goes over his experience of going deep into the DMT with pretty much this beautiful story about what you're just kind of saying, of meeting and confronting with this higher energy and this vibration, how then there was a kind of telepathic conveyance of energy, or excuse me, of information, but then there was a blending and an absorbing, but with no judgment and no, like he just has this poetic beautiful breakdown of it, where I told him, I'm like, dude, I read this and I was getting goosebumps, and like I was fucking tearing up, because it's so hard to paint the picture of what happens. And I think just this gentleman did an amazing job. So his book is going to be out. I think he's getting it published like within the next few weeks. I'm definitely going to be promoting his work on my social medias, and I actually want to potentially do like a book reading, because it is that fucking beautiful. But I was telling him, like, dude, you got to get on podcasts and share your story. And he's just kind of finding his voice to be like, this is something that needs to be shared. And he's a really, really interesting dude on a lot of different levels. So I when we get off, I'll definitely give you his contact, because he needs a little nudge to share the story. And dude, I like he's got such an amazing way to describe what you're saying. But what he does, and he uses a word, he threw out it like a phrase like, and this matters, and this matters, because he differentiates between, well, I wasn't just talking English to English with a guy. Like, it was telepathic communication that went to my core. Like, that matters. It wasn't, well, I felt vibration through my body, just like if you standing next to a strong bass speaker, yeah, you feel the beat. Well, no, like I became one with the energy waves and the sound. Like, that matters. Like, and he just goes through this like beautiful thing where it's like, no, this is different from just going into a laser light show or going to an IMAX and seeing some really cool production. Like, these experiences bring you to, whether it be a higher dimension, whether it be, like I say, removing the veil, or, getting you closer to your innate, powers. But it's a fucking awesome feeling. And, every one of these experiences that I have, I just have way more curiosity than fear, knowing that there is some, and it's not all fluff and beautiful shit. And there are some dark energies, and there's that's probably a whole nother concept, which is attachment, a potential, like, actually, like, exterior entities, some of the darker aspects of it. But just like in life, if you have the proper bullshit filter, if you arm yourself with the right skill sets and tools, and then again, you set up your own boundaries and expectations and gates of clarity, that applies to these psychedelic states or elevated dimensional states too, where it's just, it all fits. And yeah, it's so great, because you and your guests, you're all hitting on this same type of like calling that we all have, which is, yes, exploration of outer things in space and stuff like that, but it's always this inner journey that seems to be the most profound, important, and ultimately, once you get through all of the shit, like, I would say, way more important than DMT and shrooms and LSD, way more important than the hemisync technology, way more important than like drugs and sex and all that shit. Like, the most profound experiences that I've had with myself is just me, my thoughts, a quiet moment, and inner reflective. Like, that's when I've had the epiphany moments, and that's available to everybody.
It's one of the hardest things to describe, that I think that the whole idea of these higher dimensions is inside. And
Mm.
it's such a hard term to really describe, because you get into like Hermeticism, and like the first law is that the universe is mental, which clearly describes that in one particular way. But then in another way, you get into like string theory, and it describes, again, like I was kind of mentioning with the realities, that it's almost like they're kind of spun into each other, where it's existing inside of itself. So it's like, this is a trail that I've been on for a long time, and it's really, really hard to describe. Maybe it's just the third dimensional thinking on this perspective, but the point to getting to these higher dimensions, to accessing these higher dimensions, to interacting with these things, is to look inside. And I don't even mean that in the occult sense. It's just,
Right.
again, this really, really hard
Real.
means to describe, because it's like you have to explore your mental. And once you explore your mental, then you're able to open up these gateways. But again, it's so hard to describe, again, because it's like, you hear people say that, and you get into this like whole like meditation, like occult philosophy, that it's like they're guided meditations. And, people, of course, you have to consider the whole idea that people can be like hypnotized into particular things. But on the other side of it, it's like, again, you keep coming back to the same concept that, again, I'm talking in circles. It's such a hard
No,
thing to
well,
describe, but it's like the universe is inside, and the only way to access it is to first be able to access the inside. And that can be seen from a philosophical way, meaning the mind, but it also reflects and can be seen in a scientific way, meaning like astrophysics and breaking it down with string theory. Like, the only way to figure this out is to keep exploring what exactly it means that the universe is mental and the universe is inside. And it's one of those things that it's like, there's some people that have a master understanding of it, but with a master understanding of it, I feel like it's part of having that fourth dimensional perspective. So even if you are a master of understanding this concept, it's so hard to portray to other people unless they have that ability to temporarily have that perspective to really see outside of the box to really get it.
yeah. And that's why, when I went to that darkness retreat, I think it's such a great practice for mentalism, and really just taking control over that aspect of your body. And maybe we'll, like I said, we'll definitely have to do a round two. So we'll do darkness retreat, laser, DMT laser experiment, and fuck, there's a couple other things I want to talk about too. But I do want to, like, that darkness retreat, I just want to kind of hit like the why I think it was really, really important. So I mentioned how I went to Utah, and I know I'm kind of building it up, but I went to Utah a couple months ago, and this is gonna sound like, holy fuck, like, why did that, sounds like maybe a little bit like much, but it was purposeful, intentional, it was safe, everything was done, like, it was beautiful. But I did a psychedelic session where it was a full dose of LSD, a full dose of MDMA, smoking 5-MeO DMT in a vape pen like multiple times, and doing a gram of shrooms, so a relatively low dose of shrooms, but all the other three were stacked. And this was over like an 8-hour period that this whole session was. And it was awesome. Like it was this really, really deep, profound thing. And I came away with such this incredible experience. And, I share that with some people and they're like, wow, like, dude, that's a fucking ballsy move. Like you really are a psychonaut. Like, wow, you like, that's so brave. I can't believe you just did all of that. It's not fucking brave. Like I ingested a bunch of things. I hit a pipe and I hoped I didn't die. You know what I mean? Like I felt as though like my body's strong enough. I felt comfortable that my physical body could handle it. But to say that that's like a brave thing to do, it's not. You ingest a couple of things and then you lay back and hopefully you can take it. Where this darkness retreat, so it pretty much was like an Airbnb, but it was set up specifically where the bedroom and then there was a hallway and a bathroom that was, again, all the windows were black, like pitch black. But none of the doors were locked. I mean, you could walk out at any point. None of the light switches had blocks over them. You could put on the light switch at any point. All the tables had candles and lighters, and all the like right on the bed, it had a little like flashlight hanging. So if somebody actually did wig out, or if like you got to eat in the meal in the dark, you got to wipe your ass in the dark, you got to take a shower in the dark. I mean, literally pitch black for 5 fucking days in a row. So to know that there's a lighter, a flashlight, the wall switches, and the door to walk out to the outside is right there, and to know that you're not restricted in using any of those except if you tell yourself not to, and that's where that hard part comes in, where it's like, well, I'll just flick the lighter just to see, hey, am I eating peas or beans, or is this, like, or the, but to have the, like, no, I paid for this retreat. I'm doing this for not my egoic physical body, Adam. I'm doing this for my higher spiritual self, Adam. And Adam needs to like take control. And when I say I was so proud and am proud when I got out of that, and I know to myself I didn't cheat. I didn't cheat once. And again, the only one that knows that is me. But I know I didn't. And it's like, that is the mental fortitude. That takes balls. That is what I don't think. If you had 100 men, could 100 men sit in a 5-day doctor's retreat? I don't think all of them could. Could 100 men swallow 5 grams of shrooms? Yeah, and no one's going to die. Where it's like that's where that toughness comes in. And that's where I think like that particular badge of earning a multi-day darkness retreat is, I take more pride in that in my resume than saying I did the 5-MEO crazy session, because it's like I was just, I just was able to ingest it. But yeah, what you can get out of that. Like now I know just, and not that I needed more kind of checks on my own kind of notch about like how great I am or what I can do. But this was like, oh yeah, Adam, like you mentally are a tough, badass motherfucker. Like you just went in the dark for 5 days and didn't wig out. Like that's if people could do that, and that's actually why I'm saying that. So for some people, psychedelics aren't going to be for them. They have no desire to, ingest something like that. Where this darkness retreat is more challenging. So I'm not going to say it's easier than doing shrooms or doing whatever, but like for the person that isn't interested in chemically attaining that modality, this is an amazing way of doing that. And I can definitely recommend some amazing places. And I know we're not too far away from one another. The place I went was in Vermont, and yeah. So if anybody's in the New England area, this is an amazing facility to do this at.
Dude, I've always wanted to try to do that because it's always seemed like such a fascinating thing to me. And just
awesome.
It gets into the whole concept, I think, of self-control, which
Yeah.
is, I think, one of like the simplest concepts, but one of the hardest concepts for most people to grasp.
So don't drink the bottle of alcohol. Don't be the asshole. Don't that self-control. I guess
That
that's
is the
point,
hardest thing in the world for people.
Don't flip out with road rage. Don't whatever. Yeah. So exactly, great point. Where it's like if you can control yourself, or even like the other when I was flying out to Utah, on the fucking way back, like, and I lost it, but then I regained it again. So I'm on the plane. It's tight. It's tough. Like I don't like flying because I don't like being restricted, but I was able to just kind of woosah, shut my eyes, and I literally just sat still for freaking, I had a book, I had stuff, I figured, well, maybe I'd write, but I just couldn't because there was just so much shit going on. And I just shut my eyes and meditated for like 4 hours in a row. And it's like, oh, fuck, so that's where it really comes in. That's where the real life practical benefits are, where I know if I could sit 100 hours in the darkness, the next time I take a 5-hour flight, that's not like that's absolutely nothing because of what I was able to do. And I feel comfortable that I can just get into that state of just shut my eyes, shut my whatever, and I'm good. And that's what I think, a lot of people could benefit from in the society, is that you don't need stimulation from, again, either a stimulant, like a true stimulant, or from the TV screen, or from jerking off, or from porn. Or it's like, no, you can just be calm and cool because you're telling yourself, I've got to be calm and cool. And that's a really endeavor that's worth, exploring if people aren't able to do that, because that's where you get that self-knowledge, the self-love, and then everything else just kind of falls into play. And not being naive to say there won't be bills and taxes and stub toes. And I'm the perfect example of, I'm in a mentally good place. That doesn't just make physically the reality, everything all good. It just allows you to not get in your own way, not self-destruct, not self-sabotage, and actually use the circumstances and events in a positive, creative way that you can, like the book, The Alchemist of Tears, truly turn all of that shit and turn it into something that you can be proud of and make it be part of your narrative.
Oh yeah, dude. It's again going back into that whole thing about just having self-control and having the ability to just stop for a second and actually understand why you're feeling the way you're feeling and actually take the next step. Because
Mm-hmm.
think about how different that can change, simply just change interactions with people. That can change road rage, like you were saying. That can change
Yeah.
addiction. It can change so much in people's life. But the hardest part for a lot of people is they think that other people are going to teach them this concept. But when it comes to about just about anything, when it comes to psychology, philosophy, the only way that it's ever going to actually work is if you choose to take the step to do it for yourself. And that's the hardest part for a lot of people, is that they think that they just follow these things, that it's going to make everything better, but they don't truly believe it in their hearts and they don't truly follow it and believe it themselves. So again, if people can just have that idea of self-control to be able to say, I'm not going to do this in this situation. I'm going to step back for a moment and actually try to understand myself for a moment and have that true clarity and actually have
Yeah.
that moment to sit in my own mind. Like, it's the simplest and most life-changing concept you could possibly come across, is just to be able to neutralize yourself, take a moment back, and have some self-control over just about anything in your life. I mean, that can work for just about anything.
Another, I'm going to send you another lady, Jodie Powers. She wrote a book called Train Your Triggers. I'm actually writing another book with her about Dark Night of the Soul. You'd be really interested in. But she wrote this great book, really practical advice about that very thing, about the steps of knowing when you're getting triggered and kind of what those signs are. And some of it, like your point about just kind of taking a step back, it doesn't mean necessarily you need to take a step back, journal and reflect all night, go see the therapist and have this big kind of to do about it. Sometimes it can just be take 10 seconds, take 30 seconds. So if your normal response is to immediately respond with anger or to punch a wall, or like sometimes it really is just, I'm going to count to 15. Like, just, it's amazing how much that'll calm you, just to take a moment to count a few seconds as opposed to just immediately responding or immediately doing whatever. And yeah, but that does take self-control. And again, not to sound too preachy, this is something I just found out at 40 years old in my life. So for anybody that, like, it's not like, oh, how stupid are you because you haven't figured this out. This is all, like, everybody kind of has to figure this out on their own way. And to your point about, if there's no magic pill or just read a book, or if you learned everything that Manly Hall knew, you'll be happy and content and you've got it all figured out. Not at all. Not at all, not at all. Because all of those things that Manly Hall talks about, every one of those has the massive component of inner reflection of how this is, like, an ongoing process, and how, yeah, it's not, there's not one thing ever, unless it's like, oh yeah, sell your soul to the devil and you'll have some contract that is shit. But obviously that's not a good one. Like, all the ones that have any type of merit are, this is an ongoing, lifelong process, not one and done. And
That's where you get into
pot,
the whole idea of the Philosopher's Stone, that everybody thinks it's like this physical object, but the Philosopher's Stone is simply this concept of building yourself to hopefully one day be like the perfect version of yourself. But it's something that's never fully obtainable, but it's more so
well,
like a concept and like an idea to have a goal point to work yourself towards. Like, the end goal for the Philosopher's Stone is that ideal version of yourself. It's not, again, this physical thing, but more so this archetype of the perfect self.
yeah, where you're completely content and happy in your own skin. You're not trying to go anywhere. And I was talking again, one of my therapists, right? Like, oh, will they help? Yeah. And this guy, it's, this isn't some big, like, major profound kind of example, but we were talking about just, what path we're on and what path do we follow. And I kind of saying, like, if people don't want to be in my path, then fuck it, get away. And then the conversation kind of just led to, well, let's not force any path, and you got to kind of succumb and surrender, and all paths are options, right? So it's like, and that's something I've learned, like, don't push your own way. But then it kind of got to the next level where it's like, how about you just stand still in a field or whatever, and don't try to look at any path. Like you stand still and have the matrix around you move and come to you, and there's no path you need to take because you're at right where you need to be. There is no destination that you need to go at because you're at right where you have to. And like just that concept of like, went from me kind of picturing myself like trudging on this trail, like, I'm heading towards my North Star and I've got my goal and I'm going to do it, to just, how would I just stand there and that North Star just comes to me and it lands right in my hand. And like that, yeah, that idea of just surrendering and succumbing and just being at peace. Oh, but that was the rant where it's like this, the Philosopher's Stone, and kind of, I think it's, you find out that you don't want to reach any place else. You don't want to reincarnate. You don't want to like get to some greater part of yourself, or go home to your, home planet or whatever it may be. That I think truly that Philosopher's Stone is the heaven within. That Philosopher's Stone is to know that you have the power to create your destiny, which again, the first law of hermetics, right? It all comes down into you're in control of your reality due to your perception. And then that perception, and this is where it's no bullshit. This is where kind of like practical shit. That perception is in direct control of your physiology and the chemical flow that you have in your body. So whether that's pulsing endogenous DMT and you're doing breath work and getting blissed out, or you're pulsing, cortisol, or all these things that are stressing you out, or like, can you produce your own dopamine, or do you need it from smut? Like, and that's where the alchemist stone is. You're your own pharmacist. You get your high in your own supply. Nothing pisses you off. All you do is vibrate with what feels good, and you're not trying to reach heaven or die or find a path. You're just fucking, here you are, and you're good. And that is what I'm searching, seeking. I think I know I'm on the right. I'm not. I know I'm standing still, and that life is coming to me. And I know for damn sure what wasn't the right way or the right path was, 7 IPAs a day, 3 shots of bourbon. Everybody's the issue. All the problems in my life were due to somebody else instead of me. And like, it's very clear when you're turning lead into fucking dog shit, as opposed to when you're turning lead into gold. And it's just like, if it's starting to smell like dog shit, don't go with all that. If it's starting to sparkle and starting to shine, then you're moving more towards gold. And that's, again, a stupid analogy and kind of funny, but it's so obvious. Is that shiny gold, or is that shitty brown dog shit? If you can't tell the difference, then that's where that perception shift has to kind of happen. And then that, again, the clear thing, once that shift happens, you don't need to know, is it shit or gold? It's very clear, is it shit or gold?
Ain't that the truth, man? And I mean, I feel like this is a good concept that I've had for a lot of things too. That, a lot of people like to have this idea about like an endpoint or like a goal point, but a lot of the time it's about the journey itself.
Mhm.
And a lot of the time, if people actually try to make this endpoint or this goal point, it's almost like you're capping yourself. Like, this is your ideal of what you want to be. This is what you're going to be. So you never really get to enjoy like what you are currently in the development that you're in currently.
And you're
You never
definitely going
really
to be
take that.
disappointed.
Yeah, and then you'll always
Definitely.
be disappointed with it if you don't actually meet it to that point. But if you don't necessarily have this endpoint and you just let yourself grow and improve as you're able to do so, then the end goal, you'll never be disappointed, and there's
Right.
never a glass ceiling or an end cap, because it's a
Right.
progression that can continuously keep happening. So it's like, again, a perception change that a lot of people think it's good to have this goal point, but for me at least, the way I've always run the show, the way I've always done stuff for myself, it's like to really be grateful about what you have in the present. You don't want to have a goal point. You want to just basically continuously improve every single day, and wherever you make it at the end is where you make it at the end. But again, it's about the journey and not the final destination, and if you're always looking at the final destination, you're always going to be disappointed and bored with the journey.
So, if I may, let's end it with those terms and those kind of flow, because the next time we talk, I'm going to send you, like I said, my book. It's a photo diary of my journey across the country with all these crazy psychedelic shits. It's this amazing story of my journey of across the country with some crazy pictures. But I think it's a perfect representation of the chaos, the beauty, the up, the down. But to know that like everybody has to just write their own story, and it can be amazing if it's yours. Like really just try to be the best you, not be the best or the second best somebody else. And that's this whole fucking thing, whether it's done by psychedelics or esoteric learning or darkness retreats or doing anything, is just really try to get a better understanding how you fit into society so you don't drive yourself nuts. And then once you stop driving yourself nuts, you realize, wow, it's actually great to be a human. Like, it's actually really cool to be comfortable in its own skin. Like, ice cream, coffee, and blowjobs are fucking great. Like, why do I want to not get those? Like, I don't want to, you know what I mean? Like, what the fuck? So,
I mean, even people fantasizing about being rich and stuff like that, man. It's like the
I
poor
had
man's
it.
always ends up being
It
the one
doesn't.
who explores the mind and ends up becoming the philosopher, man. So it's
Yeah.
like,
Well,
as
chop
much
wood,
as a
carry
lot of people
water,
would
and
trade
then
to be rich, like I enjoy where I'm at with my current state because it gives me the ability and it makes me the type of person who actually starts exploring consciousness in the mind itself. Because if you look at any of these ancient philosophers, none of them are rich men. They were all poor, and they did that on purpose. They could really understand and see the depravity of the soul itself.
But now let me, and I agree, and I get all that, and yes, 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 and yes. But that's not mutually exclusive. And this is where I think, like, it's your relationship to it. So, like, alcohol is not the problem, money isn't the problem, success isn't the problem. It's your relationship to it. So, like, I had a really bad relationship, a negative relationship with not only alcohol but with money, success, and all those things. Where now, and I've kind of been preaching that very same thing. And believe me, I've had it all. Money will not buy you happiness. Extra material things, it's just extra clutter and shit. But there is something, and not something, there's truth where money can provide you freedom. It can allow you to express yourself. It can allow you to become more comfortable in your own skin. It can allow you to share the wealth. So I'm not naive. And there is something to be like, yes, you need to kind of be humbled and kind of learn that aspect of it. And I know you're several years younger than I am, but it's like I also know that, man, if like, what would I do if I had 50 grand right now, or if I had an extra 100 grand? Where before I would spend that on a fancy countertop or a new car or whatever, trips on something stupid. Where it's like, fuck, if I had 100 grand right now, there's 10 close friends right off the bat I know could help. There's people I could send on scholarships to do whatever. Like you were just saying, how fuck, like I would love to go to this doctor's retreat. If I had an extra 100 grand, I'd be like, man, I know what that costs. Shayn, I'm gonna hook you up, brother, because then that would help my other friend out. It's like, that's where I cannot wait to have some of the financial security that I had before. Now, do I need to make the 200 grand a year and bust my balls? And no, but do I need to make 30 grand a year and live like a fucking pauper? No, and there is that middle ground where I know I want that money back again to do the right things, and that's where it is comfortable in your own skin, where I have no fear of me ever having to take a drink again, or that alcohol will come back in my life. Just like I have no fear that I'll get persuaded or swooned by the dollar, or that I'll let some chick, because she's got a nice butt, make me do something I won't do. It's like, no, I know now who I am. And I know if I have more money again in the future, that it's going to be held well. So I just, don't, there is something to that where
It's part
used
of the
right.
journey, though,
Oh,
because you have to
absolutely. And
understand
a
it. Like we were
necessary.
saying
Oh,
earlier, that
100%.
it's like if you didn't have the money and get
But
knocked
don't
down
dwell
from
in.
it, then you wouldn't have been able to appreciate it now to say this is what I would do with it. It's part of
Absolutely.
that journey where it's like you have to go through this shitty patch to really understand and appreciate things. And I think that's where the vice versa comes
Oh,
in,
yeah.
man. That it's like if you
Well,
didn't have the money, then you wouldn't have the mindset of this is what I would do with it now, because I feel like if you were always poor and you had money, the first thing you think of is, I'm going to take care of myself. I'm going to pay all these bills first. But because you have that different mindset, your first mindset is I'm going to take care of my friends first. And that's something that you would have
you
only
need to go
gotten
through that.
if you've been through that journey before. So it's like, having being the rich person that you were originally, was a very important role in your journey to make you who you are now, because you wouldn't have had that same response. I can guarantee you now that, again, the
No, no.
first thing you would have said is you would have taken care of yourself first if you have always been poor.
No, but and even saying like how there's so much value to go into the shadow of your psyche and to do that inner shadow work and to name your demons, and so kind of like the same topic. Like you cannot have a regrowth, or you really can't do any of this self knowledge and self love unless you go and dwell in that dark and that shadow and go in some of the funk. And to your point, you really can't appreciate, like, what the fuck, me just saying I've been through now 4 heartbreaks and relationships that suck. Like, they do. But now, like, my capacity to love, or like my next relationship, like, I know how valuable those things are. But like, I guess the point isn't, once you're in your shadow and you're dwelling with your demons and your devils, the point isn't, hey, sit there and hang out, and now you're a whatever, a fucking, hanging out with the in hell the whole time. It's get there, learn your lessons, and come out. So it's like, come get the humility. Like right now, I got the humility of being a 45-year-old guy living in my parents' basement. I got the humility of not being able to afford groceries. I've got the humility of asking for my friends, like, hey, can I borrow some money? And I needed that. And honestly, I'm telling you, I needed that cockiness and that arrogance smacked off my face. And now that I had that, now it's like I can't wait for the next step where it's like, fuck, man, if I could make half of what I used to make, how much impact I'll have on this world and my community. And that's the exciting part of it. But it's not dwell in the funk, you know. So I just want to say, like, you know, don't think you're being wholesome to yourself by staying poor. Learn the lessons and move on and help people. Then let the next generation learn it.
Yeah, build yourself to be better.
Because I
Like
want to
it's a
travel around the
perfect
world. Like,
example.
let's go to fucking Egypt and sing in the freaking pyramids together. You know what I mean? Like,
Right?
but that'll take 10 grand. But if me and you had 10 grand, like I would book that with you right now in a heartbeat. And if the only thing stopping us is 10 grand, then let's get that 10 grand so we can say, hey, yeah, next year let's actually do this. You know?
Dude, it's like a prime example. I always like to throw this in the show because I find this fascinating. Have you heard of kintsugi, that like Japanese concept where basically they'll take these bowls when they're cracked, and rather than like trying to make them perfect like they were originally, they'll
Yeah,
end
with the
up filling
gold.
in gold into the cracks so
That's
that all the
beautiful.
different trauma and all the different like damage that's been done to the bowl gets displayed, and it shows in like a way that it's meant to like draw beauty to it because they
Right?
use gold within these cracks. I think that that's
Love
the
it.
same way that we have to start looking at people, is that rather
Yes.
than trying to think that we need to perfect ourselves to this perfect thing that we were before, we need to roll on with our damages, look at the damage like it's
Highlight them.
gold, and understand that that is one of the things that is the distinguishing factor that makes us beautiful, is our tumultuous past and the way that we've prepared ourselves from that.
Fuck yeah. Yeah. No, it's so beautiful. And it's, again, that's not me or you figured it out. Like, what's the guy freaking, there was a guy that was just doing a speech out west that was basically saying that Robert Grant, like, so he you know, he's a pretty deep esoteric thinker, and he's got a lot of cool concepts. But he was just kind of giving a speech where he was saying that kind of same thing. So and you know, again, and that practice is thousands and thousands of years old, and based on a philosophy that's even older than that. So yeah, we're all saying the same thing. It's the truth. We just need to get away from computers and keeping up with the Joneses, and you know, and that's what our message right now, you know, like that's what we're doing is hopefully sharing the message for some for people that get it. They're like, yeah, no shit, dummy. But for the people that don't get it, you know, at some point it'll click. So
Well, I guess before we get into the words of wisdom, I wanted to throw this idea in because I think there's a really good truth to it, that people have spent so much time studying these categories of philosophy that they think that they need to become part of this school of philosophy. But the best place to be with philosophy, with a lot of different things, is you draw in all of the best of all of these concepts and you find this perfect spot in the middle. And I feel like with the internet, with all of these people exploring, having these conversations, and really diving into this old philosophy, we're finally getting to this point in society where instead of having all these scattered schools of philosophy, we're finally starting to take the best components and put it together into this one perfect idea of philosophy. And we're starting to see all of these concepts that, you know, are pop up along everywhere. And obviously these are core elements if they show up everywhere because there's this level of importance to it. But I feel like that's where this new age philosophical movement is really kind of coming into play, is, you know, as they always say, there's nothing new under the sun. But what we're able to do at this point is take all of these old concepts and finally not have them categorized apart, but actually put them together and actually come to a really good root of a good way to live and a good moral standard to live by. And we're, again, really, really understanding all of these people's philosophies and really finally putting them together for the first point in time. And I think that's really, really important because I've always heard this joke, and I don't know exactly how it's worded perfectly. So like the main gist of it is essentially that, you know, God's sitting there with a yoga instructor, with somebody who's a Catholic, with somebody who's a Christian, with somebody who's Hindu. And he basically says that if all of you would have put it together, you would have understood that all of you had a piece of the puzzle. So I feel like that's a concept we have to take in with philosophy, that there's not one individual school that's going to be the perfect school. But if you put all these philosophies together, you know, the truth's going to be somewhere in the middle of that.
yeah, and get rid of the crap that doesn't work. Keep the stuff that does work, and keep compiling.
Exactly. Yep.
And then share authentically with your neighbor, so that way you can keep notes.
And Shayn, your perspective on it, put your life experience on it. And with that, of course, like I was mentioning earlier, man, just having that little twist of your life experience can be the one thing that actually snaps this concept into actually clicking in somebody's mind, where they're now able to change their life because their perception was changed just that little tiny bit.
That's what my book's gonna fucking do. That's what both my books are, that's what all three of my books are gonna do. No, so yeah, no, I agree. And that's what my passion is because and it's not like, well, no, it is. Like, remove all suffering. It's just because I've suffered, you've suffered, and it sucks. And not that we're trying to have some utopia where, you know, kumbaya and the world's gonna be perfect, but there's a lot of low hanging fruit when it comes to easing suffering, and that's let's do that. Um, but yeah, like I said, there is, and I don't know, not that I'm like I said throwing myself on your podcast, but there is a lot of stuff that I do want to talk about that's kind of on the funner, more esoteric, lighter side, including the laser experiment, including definitely the doctor's retreat, some of the lights and crazy shit in there. So um, I don't know, let's try to reconvene in a couple weeks or 3 weeks or so, and we'll talk about some more shit.
Absolutely, man. We'll set something up as soon as
Um,
we get off today. But before we close up, of course, I always have to end the show with some words of wisdom, as I'm sure you remember
okay,
from the last couple times you were
yes,
on. Not that,
and I'm
we
so
haven't been
wise,
portraying words of wisdom this whole show, but if there's any words of wisdom you wanted to share with the listeners at the end of the show, man, what might it be?
Mm. Um, you're never alone. So we talked about the motto from Monroe that we're more than our physical body, and that's one of the concepts that I mentioned all the time that you clearly know when you do psychedelics is that you're more than your physical body. But with and part of that, and we've talked about interacting with entities, and we've talked about concept of God, we've talked about concept of fourth dimensional beings, we've talked about mental health, we've talked about our family, issues and what's going on with our dad. And then we've also talked about the beautiful connection with other people. And I think through all of this, whether it's, hey, let's go out in the woods and explore aliens or Bigfoot, or if it's, hey, I've got some mental health shit and I've got going through the darkness, to know that we truly are not alone as not only human to human and to lean and truly lean and love on thy neighbor and be that neighbor for other people, but to the esoteric side of it, there are non-physical, non-corporeal, energetic beings out there. And whether it's praying to God or whether it's hanging out with DMT entities or whether it may be, if you can find solace and if you can better yourself and it feels good and it resonates with you, uh, to interact with these beings, that's the way to go. Not put yourself in front of a TV or do something what else somebody else said. It really is. Kind of follow your own unique path, and there's no wrong way to learn about yourself and to kind of do that exploration, but it is so worth it. So yeah, people, you're not alone on this path. It's a lot of weird misfits and people that'll hang out with you in the funky island and whatever, just because I know I leaned on a lot of people for a lot of my life, and I've been at the shoulder for people to lean on, and it makes it enjoyable. And if people whatever are looking for some camaraderie and some human connection, that will solve a lot of problems.
All you gotta do is put your flag out there, man. I mean, it's a
Yes.
concept that's talked
Fuck yeah.
about in a lot of philosophy that you just have to voice things if you actually want them. Like you can look at that occult wise, or you can look at them extremely literally. That nobody's ever
Mm-hmm.
going to know what you want. Nobody's ever going to know what you're thinking unless you actually present it and actually say it to them. So,
Yeah.
a lot of the time people think that they're completely alone out there, but that's because they never actually put the feeler out to say, man, like, who's got my back?
Mm.
If you never actually admit it out loud, then you'll never actually know. So, people got to speak up a little bit too. You got to throw that one out there.
Fuck yeah.
But man, if anybody wanted to get a hold of you possibly to share some of their experiences or stories, they wanted to pick up one of your books because definitely your books are helpful. And I think that, people definitely need to have them on their shelves. Or
Mm.
if people just wanted to connect with any of the research that you're doing, man, where can people come and find you across the internet, and where can people find your books at?
My email address is booksbyadambutler@gmail.com. That's probably the easiest way to get in touch with me. I always offer free PDF copies of my books. So as much as I want to sell them, I always, the message is there and the information is there. So if anybody wants a free copy, right now the DMT Field Guide, I can send that out to you really easily. The other books will be ready in a couple of weeks. But they're available where books are sold: Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Walmart.com. They're indie bookstores and shit like that. As far as social media, Instagram is probably the best one that I'm active at, and that's the feeds on that are Books by Adam Butler, um, or Butler's DMT Field Guide, one or the other. But I'm there, I'm accessible, and on a real serious, and end it kind of back to my area of passion. I love talking about DMT. I love talking about the laser experience. I love talking about sex and psychedelics. I love talking about all of that shit. The last few months, it's been really honed in that the most important message that I have is the mental health and the suicide ideation and kind of helping people walk through some shit. So, um, I offer that email address too. If anybody wants to talk, needs to talk, if people need help with anything, not only myself, but my inner circle of friends, and as well as our resources are available. And I'm always there to answer the phone if somebody needs somebody. Um, if they're really going through that dark of a place, again, you're not alone. I'm personally here for you, and I will respond.
Well, man, as usual, I really, really appreciate you making the time to come on. I always really, really enjoy our conversations on
Me
a
too.
personal level. And of course, just for the show, because we end up talking about some really interesting concepts that I think will definitely help a lot of people, man. But I can't say it enough, man. I appreciate you coming on. I'm really looking forward to having you on sooner rather than later. And
Now,
I've
what
said
state
it
are
a
you
few
in?
times, but we got to make sure that we actually do this collaboration, man. 'Cause I want to have you
Yeah,
on the show a
fuck
lot
yeah.
more often. And Michigan, by the way.
Michigan. All right. Well, because I'm driving across the country like whatever, fucking 3 or 4 times already in the next few months. So maybe I'll have to go a little north and whatever. We'll run by and have
Good
a
news is
coffee or
I'm in
something.
southern Michigan, so you wouldn't have to detour too far into Michigan because I'm in
Oh,
Detroit
there you
area,
go.
so I'm only about an hour north of the border. So,
Oh, that's not too bad. Yeah, because I cut through Chicago typically, quite a bit. So that's not that bad.
yeah, we'll have to figure it out after the show, man. Figure out if you're gonna be popping by and we can meet up. That'd be awesome, man. I really enjoy that.
Fuck yeah. All right, man.